Hi, I'm George from Mist and Stone, bringing you all the answers to the questions you never knew you wanted the answers to. We bring you mythology, history, nostalgia. I'm sitting here on Dublin Docklands. It's a nice, if somewhat cool day. 108 years ago, in a month or so, this was a very different place. This was not a place that you would want to be sitting. It was at the height of the Easter Rising, April the 29th. And a tragedy happened on the bridge here behind me. At that time, that was an older bridge. It was a bridge that opened to allow water traffic from one side to the other. But more importantly, the mill behind me, Boland's Mills, was one of the garrisons held by the Irish Volunteers during Easter week in 1916. Many miles away in Hullage, the Dublin Fusiliers and the Inniskillens were in their trenches on the front lines in the Great War, World War I. That morning, the Germans released deadly gas, which ended up killing more Irishmen than were killed in the entire Rising. And actually a few Germans also, when the wind changed and the gas blew back into the German trenches. One of those men was a man called John Naylor, who came from around this area. He couldn't possibly know the tragic coincidence that was about to be played out on that bridge behind me as he took his last breaths in France. That morning, his wife Margaret left their 3 young children, Maggie, Kitty and Tessie, and went out on a mission to buy bread. A simple task we do every day and don't think about it. As she was proceeding across the bridge there behind me, she was caught in the crossfire. It's never really been established who fired the shot, whether it came from the Republican side or whether it came from the British side, or whether the shot was deliberate or she was simply caught in the crossfire. But the result was the same. She was hit in the head. They didn't actually die on the same day, as Margaret lasted a few more days in hospital before eventually succumbing to her wounds. But the symmetry can't be lost. As I said, Margaret had left her 3 young children to go in search of the bread. Those 3 children were now orphans, both their mother and father being killed on the same day. They were taken in by Margaret's sister and raised to adulthood only down the road on Pearse Street, over a shop on Pearse Street. Joseph Stalin, not known for his human kindness, said, "While one death is a tragedy, 1,000 deaths is a statistic." Well, here are 2 examples of how every one of those statistics is a tragedy. Margaret's final resting place wasn't known for many years. Her husband, John, was commemorated in a monument in Luce with all the other victims of that particular terrible day there. And he is presumed to be buried on the battlefield somewhere. His body was never recovered. Margaret's grandson by the middle daughter Kitty, a few years ago, many years later, a few years ago, managed to trace her final resting place to the British Army Cemetery in Grange Gorman, where he finally erected a headstone and included his grandfather in the inscription. So after all these years, they've been reunited in words at least. Thought you might find this little human story interesting. As I said, it's also a case that more Irishmen were killed on that battlefield that day than were killed in the entire rising. Also, Margaret was the first woman killed on Easter week. There's an interesting footnote here that I leave you with. Elizabeth O'Farrell, who carried the surrender to all the garrisons, she was a nurse in the GPO. She carried the white flag of surrender up to General Law from Padraig Pearse. And she was escorted round the various garrisons later on that day and the next day to bring the surrender to the garrisons, bring Pearse's order of surrender to the various garrisons. When she was going into the Boland's Mill garrison, she noted, as I proceeded across Ringsend Bridge, I saw lying on the ground 2 loaves of bread and a hat soaked in blood. If there isn't a more poignant picture of tragedy, I don't know what is. Anyway, I hope you found this content interesting. If you do, please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for when we're bringing out some more. I'll see you again soon. Slán. Goodbye.